Hi, my name is Amy Heyse, and this is my friend Elizabeth Zelasko, and she's joining me today to talk to us about icons. Elizabeth is a fine artist. She's also a very talented iconographer, so she's just going to talk a little bit about what an icon is, how to make it, and what you can do if you're interested in learning how to do it yourself.
So my name's Elizabeth Zelasko, and I'm an artist and an iconographer. And I went to art school in New York City and left to study iconography, Russian Orthodox iconography, and finished my degree in art in Colorado. But what I do now is basically make icons or religious paintings. An icon is a very special thing. It's a my goodness, it's a sacred piece of work, right? So it belongs in the church or in the home in an honored place. What makes an icon different from art in general is that there's a much more strict way to create them. So there's rules that we have to follow if we want to say that this is an Orthodox icon. We follow the traditions that have been handed down, and it's very particular as far as material goes and the way that they're painted, the different layers that, the different layers that are on top of one another. They have to be in a specific order. So traditional icons are made out of egg tempera, and you basically take an egg. And this is how painters painted throughout history. Like, this is how paint was made in the Renaissance time. So it's nothing too specific to iconography. With the invention of art stores and manufacturing paint, like we can just go to the art store and buy a tube of paint. But so icons stick to the tradition of making your own paint. So you take an egg and you get the egg yolk off, or not the yolk, the white part, and you just take the yolk, the yellow part, and you have to release the inside of the egg from the sac that holds the whole little yolk together. So the inside of that's put into a cup, and then we mix it with white wine, and that's sort of our egg emulsion. So that will be the binding agent that makes the paint. And then egg tempera is powdered pigment, and so I have a collection of all different colors, and some people have much more fabulous collections than I do. I'm really jealous of my one friends, but so it's just powdered pigment with different colors, and mostly they're natural pigments, so it's nothing manufactured. My teacher actually, when she would travel, she would like find local like stones and like crush that up and make paint out of it. And I just thought, gosh, that's so cool. I mean, talk about glorifying earth. Creation is coming together and glorifying God. So you mix these two things together, and that creates the paint. And so you can change the color by changing the formula of the pigments that you use, and that goes on the icon board. And so I even have chickens, so I'll often use their eggs are nicer. If you can get organic eggs, the yolk is a lot stronger than store-bought eggs, so it's a really nice, yeah. My kids are rollerblading in the hallway.
My kids do that too.
Yeah. It's always supposed to be on wood. The grain of the wood is supposed to be oriented upwards, so it's kind of like when you're looking at the icon, your thoughts and your prayers are oriented up towards God, and so it's important that the wood grain is going up. So it takes a long time to make the board itself. You can have a board that doesn't have braces on the back, but sometimes when they have braces on the back, it helps with warping, because they last forever. I mean, they last forever unless there's a fire, God forbid, but they're really kind of heirloom pieces. The gesso takes a good couple days to do. It's a homemade gesso. So gesso is kind of like if you've ever painted a wall, and it's drywall, you always want to put a primer on first, and so that way the paint can not just soak through the drywall. So same thing with the icon board. You have this piece of wood. If you just put paint on wood, the wood's like a sponge, so it's gonna just like suck up the color. You won't see anything. So painting it white first helps to help the person see the color and the image that you're creating. So you always have to have gesso on the board. Rapid fire. This is how an icon is made. This talk is usually an hour long, but we're just gonna do it. So there's a board. So you have the board, and it's made in a specific way, right? Like the inset and the braces on the back. And then I get the board, I make the gesso, It's marble dust and chalk and rabbit skin glue, which is just interesting. So then that goes on the board, and it's several layers. So as soon as it dries, you put another layer on, and you do that several times. You let it dry for like a couple days, and then you sand the heck out of it until it literally feels like a smooth, like quartz countertop. Like it's just real smooth, real nice. I get the image that I need to make. So it's drawn out the way that I want it to look. I put transfer paper down, which is just like a thin sheet of paper that has graphite on one end. So I put that down. I put my drawing on top. I trace my drawing on. I take that all off, and then I just have this sketch that's on the board. Then I scrape the image into the board, and that's just because the image isn't supposed to be like superficially laid on top. It's supposed to be like one with the board, and so it's kind of like you write the word of God on your heart. You carve it in, kind of like the laws in the stone that Moses had. You know, it's like it's carved into this earth. So it's not just laying on top. So it's a part of it now. And then we do the clay. So this is liquid clay. It's called bowl or red bowl. And it's really it's a red clay that's mixed with like glue and you mix it up together, and it's like a liquidy clay. Okay, so after you have just the plain board and you have your image on the board, the first thing to go on is the clay. And this is sort of like the red clay of Adam. So think of like the creation of the universe, right? It's like it's all these things, all these nature. My dog, sorry. So it's kind of like creation itself, where it's like you have all these natural elements, and then on the last day, man is created, right? So we have Adam, the red clay of Adam. So that's put on the halo. So you can see wherever there's gold, there's almost always the red clay underneath. So you put the red clay underneath the halo, and you burnish it. You sand it and you burnish it. It takes me about a day just to do the red clay part. Once that's down and dried and burnished and it's really shiny, then you get the gold leaf out. And in order to adhere the gold leaf onto the clay, you breathe onto the clay, which is very biblical, right? This is like straight out of the Bible. God breathed into Adam and gave him life. And I breathe in threes. So I just take a section, and with the hot air from my breath, I literally just go like this. And I'll drink tea sometimes, so it's like even hotter. So it moistens the clay, and then you lay the gold on top, and the gold is now one with the clay. And the first line of paint to go on. So from this point, you know, it's just wood, gesso, clay, and now from this point on, and gold, sorry, and from this point on, it's pigment. So it's sort of like the marriage of these two different things. But so to remember that the clay is underneath the halo, we paint this red line around, and that's the first line to go on with pigment. And so that's a purified red, right? So it's like all the dirt and all the muck is out of the clay now. It's purified now that we have God. And so it's a pure red that goes on. And so it's called the marriage line, or the red crown of martyrdom, because it's this marrying of these two different elements that now are becoming one. And so that's the beginning, sort of the opening up of the icon. And then it's the first layer is called Rosakrish. And this is, again, this is the Russian Orthodox way of doing it. Okay, so there's other different forms of iconography. This is what I learned was the Russian Orthodox. So you have this thing called Rosakrish, which is the first layer. And it's kind of like in creation, where God was just like, let there be land, you know? And so this is like real gritty pigments. Like I have to stand it down a little bit after this, but it's the opening up of the icon. And it's very dark colors, kind of like before God said, let there be light, right? So it's just the darkness of the earth, almost like a chaos a little bit, because it's all just, it looks like marble almost. It's really very earthy looking. Then the first highlight is kind of like when God said, let there be light. The first illumination, if you'll, the first enlightenment, you know, the first knowledge of God. So that's the light. Then you do your first float, which is, it brings harmony with the first layer, which is Rosakrish. It brings harmony with the highlight. And so we meditate on reconciliation at this point. So kind of like, here I am, Lord, and here's all my earthly stuff, and here's all my sin, and here's you, here's the highlight, and it's bringing, knowledge to what I am. And then the first float that goes on top brings those two colors together in harmony. And so we meditate on reconciliation, going to confession. Real beautiful. And then from that point on, you're just building up. You're doing another highlight, and then another float, another highlight, another float, until the very end you finish. It's almost like building a pyramid. You just get more and more detailed as you get up, and more finer lines. And then you have the last highlight. There's no float on top of that one, because this is sort of like when we die, we're going to be in front of God, and the veil is lifted, and there's nothing in between us anymore. And it's just that pure light hitting my face. Like right now, there's so many veils, and there's so much dirt in between from my own stuff, but it's like, and that's just lovely. The last line to go on, the omega line, the last line to go on is the white. So that's the closing of the icon. So it's kind of this opening, and then everything's painted, and then you close the icon around the halo. The white just represents the gesso that we started with. And then you varnish it, so you'll seal the icon so that it can't wash away or get hit with water and drip or something. So the sealing is sort of, I think we meditate on confirmation. So it's kind of like you get anointed with oil at confirmation. And so this is sort of like the anointing in a sense of the icon. It like seals the icon, seals the gift, but it should be blessed too. I mean, it should go, the traditional way of blessing them, at least in the Byzantine church, and in the Orthodox church too, is that the icon actually sleeps on the altar overnight. How beautiful is that? So it spends the whole night on the altar, and then Mass is celebrated the next morning, and then it's venerated by the congregation, and then whoever takes the icon takes it after that. So depending on the size of the icon and the complexity of the icon. So if you're doing like an 8x10, one face, as opposed to maybe something like Pentecost, where like everybody's there and there's lots of detail, like that could take very, very long to do. But I would say I've never, ever done one under 15 hours, and it's usually more like 40. Yeah, and depending on the size too, I did the largest one I ever did was a 24x36. And that took a long time, because that's huge. That's a lot of material too, and you're kind of, it takes so long just to paint all those little things. And it's a wonderful experience, but it takes a long time. Yeah. If you have a young child who's interested in doing religious arts, don't do it with acrylic paint. It's just that some of these pigments are poisonous, and it's powder. So you're like, do you trust a 3-year-old with powder? I don't think so. I don't even trust my kid with like blush, So it's like, I wouldn't hand them egg tempera paint to mess around with. So I would say, you can play around with acrylic paints. Maybe a teenager might be a little bit more trustworthy with some of these materials. They're also expensive. Like the materials themselves are expensive. Just that little sheet of, a 25 pack of gold leaf is like $50. So it's like, it's not a hobby that you, like you just, so be smart about it. Yeah. And if your kid's old enough to be respectful with the materials, watch them anyway. Like just make sure they're easy to spill, and then you wouldn't want that on their hands. And washing them, you should have gloves on when you wash the palette off, because you don't want to touch that stuff. You don't want that to get into your system. So I would say materials wise, I would say you should be a certain age for sure. You can practice drawing icons. There's all sorts of things online that I've seen, just like little, like, here's how you do it. An icon hand. Yeah. So you could practice that as you get older, and then maybe take a class. I definitely recommend doing it under the guidance of somebody. Like say you are 20 something and you want to learn, I think that it's important to find a teacher, because it's a very spiritual practice, and you don't want to do that alone. It's always good to have a mentor of some sort. So yeah. Thank you for watching this, and thanks for all the great questions. I just love talking about this. This is what I love to do, and so I love to share what I do with people. If you feel interested, or you know somebody who's interested in learning iconography, I highly recommend doing it. It's really a beautiful adventure to learn how to make these things, and it's just it's been a real treasure to have icons in my house. And at the very least, just get icons for your house. Get holy images in your home. They will have a huge impact on your children. If you think about all the things that we see all day long, even on our phones, how much of it is holy, how much of it is a real sacred thing, right? And so when we put holy images into our homes, we bring God into our lives, and we elevate what we see, right? We elevate the visual things around us, and they inspire us. I mean, when I was younger, it had a huge impact on me. My mom hung a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe up in the hallway, and it had a massive impact on my relationship with God. And so I want to encourage you to bring holy images into your home. Yeah, but thanks for watching. Yeah, my website's elizabethzelasko.com, and I have an Instagram account where I share about iconography. I believe it's at elizabeth.zelasko. And I'm reachable through those things. I sell prints of my artwork on elizabethzelasko.com.